You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible. These Democrats have been whining and complaining, those who lost, saying, oh, it was defund the police is the reason. Obama weighed in on this on an interview on a Snapchat show. Listen to this.
It's interesting. We take for granted, if you want people to buy your sneakers, that you're going to market it to your audience. If a musician drops a record, there's going to try to reach certain audiences, speaking to folks where they are. It's no different in terms of ideas. If you believe, as I do, that we should be able to reform the criminal justice system so that it's not biased and treats everybody fairly, I guess you can use a snappy slogan like defund the police, but you know you've lost a big audience the minute you say it, which makes it a lot less likely that you're actually going to get the changes you want done. But if you instead say, let's reform the police department so that everybody's being treated fairly, divert young people from getting into crime, and if there's a homeless guy, maybe we send a mental health worker there instead of an armed unit that could end up resulting in a tragedy. Suddenly, a whole bunch of folks who might not otherwise listen to you are listening to you. So the key is deciding, do you want to actually get something done, or do you want to feel good among the people you already agree with? And if you want to get something done in a democracy, in a country as big and diverse as ours, then you've got to be able to meet people where they are and play a game of addition and not subtraction.
Well, that piece right there is pissing off lots of people. Lamont is one of those folks. Marc has a new book out that actually speaks to this whole issue of policing. Folks, we have that book cover. Please pull it up. It is We Still Here, Pandemic, Policing, Protest, and Possibility. Marc, I'm going to bring up other guests in a minute, but Marc, I want to talk to you first. I've been seeing comments. Folks are not happy on social media. But the thing that's interesting here is Obama acts like stuff hasn't been done. The reality is, we saw changes made in San Francisco. We've seen changes made in a bunch of different police departments. The folks who have been saying defund the police have actually been achieving wins. What is he talking about?
That's what's so frustrating about this. I understand the president's on book tour and he's, sometimes speaking in sound bites and moving very quickly, but this is imprecise. First of all, I've been part of the prison abolition movement for decades now. This is not a movement that just came out of nowhere. This is not a movement that has not thought about slogans and branding and conversations, but ultimately it's a policy demand. And quite honestly, it's not the most radical policy demand that came out. Defund the police is a very simple call to take resources from one place and invest it in places where we can better use them and where people will be better served, where people's needs will be met. And to your point, Roland, we absolutely have gotten wins. Right? We got wins in Minneapolis. We got wins in Camden. But it's not just about taking money out of police budgets. It's also about reorienting our thinking. And the president makes it seem as if the fundamental problem here is that we simply haven't presented it in a way that is palatable to people, when the truth is many of the people who have been opposing us, whether it's in Ferguson, whether it's in Baltimore, it's people who don't want to defund police. They want to invest in police. They want to support police unions. They want to make police less accountable. This isn't a question of our ability to articulate our vision. This is a question of people not being able to imagine a world where we operate differently. And the president didn't do us any favors with his comments, and he, quite frankly, didn't echo what I think is truthful in this case.
But also, I have yet to see any actual data from these folks who lost, and let's also break down the Democrats who lost. Outside of the two Democrats in Florida, Shalala and Marquez, or whatever her name is, the other folks who lost were in essentially red districts.
Yes.
Now, and so show me in those districts how they're impacted by policing. The places where they're arguing defund the police, which actually does not, and again, the opposition took that, oh, you're trying to say don't fund the cops. No, idiot. This is what it means. So to me, you're sort of playing into your opponent's hands by allowing their narrative to control what you do when in fact the purpose of the slogan is to push folks as far as they can. And if I push that and then you say, well, no, we'd rather call it reform. Well, damn, call it whatever you want to call it, but do something.
Do something. And I think your first point is on the money as well, right? Which is that these candidates that were running in red districts, they weren't going to win anyway. And the issue wasn't their failure to distance themselves from Medicare for all or Green New Deal or defunding the police. You know, some people said they were running too close to socialism, the Democratic Party. That's all sore losing Monday morning quarterbacking from people who, quite frankly, didn't get on board with what the people were calling
but they
for.
They called individuals who were Second Amendment believers and who were capitalists socialists. Look, the Republicans are going to call you socialist regardless. Look at what's happening right now with Warnock in Atlanta. Oh my God, scary Warnock. Oh my goodness, he hung with Castro and Jeremiah Wright. This whole deal. But Kelly Leffler never mentioned, and we'll get to it later, she never mentioned that she went to his church, Ebenezer, right, for MLK Day with Johnny Isaacson, the other the Republican who replaced. So they always are going to brand Democrats as radical, left, socialist. And if they didn't use defund the police, they will use the other the three-word phrase, Black Lives Matter. It doesn't matter.
Right. And the president is playing into those hands, as you said, by acting as if those are things that we should legitimately be running from. And history doesn't aid that argument either. You know, suffrage now, abolition now, women's rights now. These were phrases these were snappy phrases that didn't make everybody comfortable, but we stayed with them. We stayed the course. We fought for justice. We won. The same thing has to happen here. But instead, there are many people, middle-of-the-road Democrats, who are willing to run from these things. They're willing to run from Black Lives Matter and Medicare for all and Green New Deals. Hell, Joe Biden won the presidency by running from some of that stuff because he wanted to appeal to a certain base. But the election's over. At some point, we have to run on our values. We have to have an affirmative vision of the world and say what we want, not just what we don't want. And saying that we want to defund police is a reasonable argument. And the failure to get it, I'll say it again, is not because people don't understand what we really mean. And it's not because we're not smart enough to just say reform the police, because that ain't what we're calling for. We're calling for something more fundamental here. The problem is that people can't imagine a world without policing in the way that it currently functions. And the problem is that there are many people who are on the other side of the equation who want to see more policing, more quote unquote law and order in the Donald Trump way, who want to see more criminalization of vulnerable people. And until we get at that core issue, instead of gaslighting and blaming people who are calling for justice, we ain't never going to get nowhere.
This also, and let's just call it what it is, this is also about making white people comfortable. This is, can we come up with something that's non-offensive? Okay, no, defund the police. No, can we just say reform the police? Okay, here's my whole deal. Fine. Show me where the phrase reform the police has actually caused them to say, okay, you know what? Now I agree with you.
Right. That's the frustrating part, Roland. They act as if we just started this movement last week. We have been calling for reforms to the police since the moment that policing started. Whether you begin policing with slave patrols, whether you begin it in New England or in Boston in particular, or whether you begin it in the more modern iteration. At every moment where there's been policing, there have been people who have been calling to reform them. And at every moment, there have been people who have pushed back. And in this very specific modern era, from Rodney King forward or from Trayvon Martin forward, we have called for reforms. We've called for citizen review boards. We have called for outside arbiters. We have called for community policing. We have called to demand that police live in the neighborhood. We have called for body cameras. We have called for every kind of reform that you could imagine, and they've never said yes to any of it. So they need to stop acting as if we could only say the word reform instead of these crazy radical demands, that we'd somehow get what we want. We got to ask for what we want if we want to get it.
Marc Lamont Hill, he is the author of the book, We Still Here, Pandemic, Policing, Protest, and Possibility. Marc, we appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Folks, back to our Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just
It's time to be smart. When we control our institutions, we win. This is the most important news show on television of any racial background. Y'all put $2, $3, $4, $5, $10, $15, $20, $30 on this and keep this going. What you've done, Roland, since this crisis came out in full bloom. Anybody watching this, tell your friends. Go back and look at the last 2 weeks, especially of Roland Martin Unfiltered. I mean, hell, go back and look at the last 2 days. You've had sitting United States senators today, Klobuchar and Harris. Whatever you have you can bring to Roland Martin Unfiltered to support it, please do, because this information may literally save your life.
Watch Roland Martin Unfiltered daily at 6 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, Facebook, or Periscope, or go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered Daily Digital Show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com.